Ancient Egypt. Today on the journey. Back in time, we embark on ancient Egypt, not merely to recount names and dates, but to step inside the beating heart of ancient Egypt, to understand the people, the gods they worshipped, the pharaohs who ruled as living gods, and the silent secrets still buried beneath the desert sands. And here's the most haunting part. Though millennia have passed, ancient Egypt never truly died. Its influence lives in our language, our symbols, our architecture, and even the way we think about life, death, and the afterlife. So let us travel together, through temples and tombs, through myths and mysteries, as we uncover the story of ancient Egypt, the eternal land of gods and kings. This is The Journey Back in Time. Subscribe to this channel as we bring history back to life. Stay until the end as we uncover the Egyptian mysteries. The gift of the Nile. The river Nile was a gift from the gods, and indeed, without the Nile, Egypt would have been nothing more than barren desert. Every year, like clockwork, the river flooded. This flooding was not chaos, it was a gift from the gods. The waters receded, leaving behind rich black soil, fertile enough to sustain a civilization for thousands of years. This annual cycle was the rhythm of life, and the Egyptians built their entire calendar around it. But here lies a mystery. How did they master this river so precisely, predicting its floods and measuring its levels with tools like the Nilometer? Was it pure observation, or did they possess a deeper, forgotten science? Some say their knowledge of the stars allowed them to align heaven and earth with uncanny precision. The Nile was more than survival. It was a highway of life. Boats carried goods, soldiers, and priests. Papyrus scrolls traveled its waters, as did golden treasures and sacred statues during festivals. To the Egyptians, the Nile itself was a god, the bringer of abundance. Imagine standing on its banks, hearing the songs of farmers praising and thankful for the harvest. It was not just water they worshipped, it was order, stability, and the gift from the gods. The pharaohs of Egypt. To the Egyptians, the pharaoh was not a man. He was the living embodiment of the gods. This fusion of divine and mortal gave Egypt something unique, a ruler who was both king and god. Pharaohs wore crowns not just for ceremony but as symbols of cosmic power. The white crown of Upper Egypt, the red crown of Lower Egypt, and when united, symbolizes the unification of the two lands. Take for example Pharaoh Narmer, often considered the first unifier of Egypt around 3100 BCE. His famous palette shows him wearing both crowns, symbolizing dominion over all Egypt. But was this unification only political, or was it also spiritual, a merging of dualities, of chaos and order, life and death, desert and river? Pharaohs were not only rulers, they were architects of eternity. They commanded the building of temples aligned with stars, monuments so colossal they still baffle engineers, and tombs designed to last for millennia. But here's the chilling truth. Their lives were filled with rituals, omens, and divine law. A single mistake could bring famine, war, or plague. To be pharaoh was to bear the weight of the cosmos. Gods, myths, and the afterlife. Egypt was not one story. It was thousands of stories woven together by myth. To understand their civilization, you must understand their gods. At the core stood Ra, the sun god, sailing across the sky by day and descending into the underworld by night to battle the serpent of chaos, Apophis. Every sunrise was not guaranteed. It was victory reborn. Then there was Osiris, the god of the dead, murdered by his jealous brother Set and resurrected by his wife Isis. This myth was not just a story, it was the foundation of their belief in eternal life. To die in Egypt was not to end, but to transform. And presiding over the dead was Anubis, the jackal-headed god, guiding souls through the weighing of the heart ceremony. Imagine standing in that hall, your heart placed on scales against the feather of truth, Maat. If your heart was heavy with sin, you would be devoured by the monster Ammit and your existence erased forever. But if you passed, you entered the field of reeds, an eternal paradise, a mirror of Egypt itself. What's remarkable is how much of this belief system influenced later religions. The concept of judgment after death, of eternal reward or punishment, echoes through Christianity, Islam, and beyond. Could it be that Egypt gave the world its first true blueprint of heaven and hell? The pyramids, messages in stone. Perhaps nothing embodies ancient Egypt more than the pyramids. rising from the desert like frozen suns, they were not just tombs. They were messages carved into eternity. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built for Pharaoh Khufu around 2560 BCE, contains 2.3 million blocks of stone, some weighing up to 80 tons. Modern engineers still debate how these stones were transported and placed with such precision. Some believe ramps, others suggest counterweights, but a few whisper about lost technologies or knowledge passed down from an even older civilization. What is undeniable is their cosmic alignment. The Great Pyramid is aligned with true north more accurately than most modern compasses. Its shafts point to Orion's belt and Sirius, stars sacred to Osiris and Isis. This was not chance. It was a cosmic map, a bridge between earth and sky. Inside, the king's chamber resonates with a haunting echo, as if the stones themselves were tuned to some forgotten frequency. Some theorists suggest the pyramids were not merely tombs, but power plants of energy or gateways of transformation. Whether tomb or temple, one fact remains. Over 4,000 years later, the pyramids still stand. The sacred language of hieroglyphs. Imagine walking through a temple wall, its surface alive with thousands of tiny symbols, birds, eyes, snakes, stars, reeds, all dancing together in perfect harmony. These were not mere decorations. These were hieroglyphs, the sacred language of Egypt. To the Egyptians, writing was not human invention. It was divine. They believed Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, gifted writing to mankind. Every symbol carried not just sound, but power. To carve a hieroglyph was to breathe life into the world. There were over 700 symbols, combining images, sounds, and ideas. A picture of an owl might represent the sound M, while the Ankh symbol represented not just life, but the concept of eternal life itself. Writing wasn't simply recording. It was magic. Scribes were the keepers of this sacred art. Trained for years, they could read and write what the common farmer could not. Their work recorded laws, prayers, tax records, and epic tales. Without them, Egypt would have had no memory. But then, as centuries passed, the knowledge of hieroglyphs was lost. For almost 1,500 years, their walls stood silent, their secrets locked away, until in 1799, a soldier in Napoleon's army discovered the Rosetta Stone. With its parallel text in Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphs, scholars like Jean-François Champollion finally cracked the code in the 1820s. Suddenly, the silent walls spoke again, revealing names of pharaohs, hymns to the gods, and intimate stories of daily life. Think about it. For over a millennium, those symbols stared at humanity, waiting patiently until we were ready to listen again. Temples, homes of the gods. In ancient Egypt, temples were not places where common people gathered like modern churches or mosques. They were not for worshippers, they were for the gods themselves. The greatest temples, like Karnak and Luxor, were sprawling complexes where priests performed rituals daily to feed, bathe, and clothe the statues of gods as if they were living beings. At dawn, priests would break the seal of the sanctuary, awaken the god statue, dress it in fine linen, and present offerings of food and incense. But these temples were more than ritual halls. They were cosmic blueprints. The massive columns represented papyrus reeds of the primeval swamp. The sanctuary was the first mound of creation, and the ceiling painted with stars mirrored the heavens. To walk through a temple was to walk through creation itself. Karnak, the largest religious complex ever built, was expanded for over 1,500 years by multiple pharaohs. Imagine standing before the hypostyle hall, surrounded by 134 massive columns, each carved with hieroglyphs and towering like stone trees. When the sunlight filters in, you feel as though you are standing in a forest not of wood, but of eternity. And then there were the hidden mysteries. Many temples were aligned with celestial events. At Abu Simbel, twice a year, the sun's rays illuminate the statues of gods deep inside the temple. How did they achieve such precision thousands of years ago? Coincidence or mastery of cosmic science? Mummies, the quest for immortality. Few images are more tied to Egypt than the mummy. But to the Egyptians, mummification was not about preserving bodies for curiosity, it was about immortality. They believed the soul had many parts. The Ka, life force, the Ba, personality, and the Ak, transformed spirit. For these to survive, the body had to remain intact. Thus began the elaborate process of embalming. The body was washed, organs removed and placed in canopic jars, the heart sometimes left in place, the brain often discarded. Then the body was dried in natron salt for 40 days, wrapped in linen and adorned with amulets. Finally, it was placed in a coffin, often nested inside multiple coffins, decorated with spells from the Book of the Dead. The ritual wasn't just practical, it was spiritual engineering. The spells, the wrappings, the golden masks, like that of Tutankhamun, were designed to guide the soul through the dangers of the underworld. But here's where it becomes chilling. Despite all their care, tombs were often robbed, mummies desecrated, and yet, the few that survived, like Tutankhamun's, have fascinated the world. When his tomb was opened in 1922, rumors of a pharaoh's curse spread after members of the expedition died mysteriously. Science explains it as infection or coincidence, but perhaps the ancients knew something we didn't. Mummies remind us of a civilization obsessed not with death, but with defeating death. A people who refuse to accept oblivion. The queens of Egypt. Though Egypt was ruled mostly by kings, its queens were among the most powerful women in history. Take Hatshepsut, who crowned herself pharaoh and ruled for over 2 decades. She wore the false beard of kingship, led expeditions, and built some of the most magnificent temples ever seen. Or Nefertiti, the queen whose beauty became legendary, who alongside Akhenaten reshaped Egyptian religion in a daring experiment to worship a single god, the Aten, the sun disk. For a brief time, Egypt became almost monotheistic, centuries before other great religions rose. And, of course, Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt. She spoke multiple languages, commanded fleets, and played a dangerous political game with Rome itself. History often reduces her to her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, but Cleopatra was far more: a strategist, a ruler, and the last flame of an ancient empire about to be swallowed by the West. These queens remind us that Egypt was not only about kings and gods, but about women who shaped the destiny of nations. Akhenaten and the Revolution of the Sun. For thousands of years, Egypt thrived under a pantheon of gods: Ra, Osiris, Isis, Horus, Anubis. Temples filled the land, priests held immense power, and daily rituals bound the nation to the divine. But in the 14th century BCE, one pharaoh attempted something radical, something that nearly tore Egypt apart. His name was Akhenaten. At first, he was Amenhotep IV, son of Pharaoh Amenhotep III. But soon after taking the throne, he turned against the mighty priesthood of Amun and declared that Egypt would worship only one god, the Aten, the sun disk. It was a spiritual revolution. Akhenaten closed temples, erased other gods' names, and built an entirely new capital city, Amarna, dedicated to the Aten. Art changed too. Gone were the stiff, idealized statues of pharaohs. Instead, Akhenaten was depicted with elongated features, a potbelly, and strangely androgynous qualities. His wife, Nefertiti, appeared alongside him as nearly equal in power. Historians still debate: was this the world's first attempt at monotheism? Was Akhenaten a visionary prophet ahead of his time, or a heretic who destabilized Egypt? His reign was short-lived. After his death, Egypt rushed to restore the old gods. The boy king Tutankhaten, better known as Tutankhamun, restored the name of Amun and abandoned Amarna. Akhenaten's monuments were defaced, his name struck from records, his revolution erased. But not completely. His vision lingers like a shadow in history. Some even suggest his ideas may have influenced later religions that reshaped the world. Rameses the Great, Pharaoh of Pharaohs. If Akhenaten was the heretic king, then Rameses II, known as Rameses the Great, was the conqueror and builder, the pharaoh who defined Egyptian power for eternity. Reigning for over 60 years in the 13th century BCE, Rameses commanded armies that clashed with the mighty Hittites at the Battle of Kadesh, one of the largest chariot battles in history. Though the battle ended in stalemate, Rameses proclaimed it a glorious victory, carving his triumph on temple walls for all eternity. But it wasn't only war that made him great. Rameses filled Egypt with monuments so grand they still dominate the landscape. His colossal statues at Abu Simbel, carved directly into cliffs, are aligned so that twice a year the rising sun illuminates his throne inside. Was this mere architecture, or an eternal display of cosmic mastery? He built more temples, statues, and obelisks than any other pharaoh, leaving his name on almost every stone. Even today, when we picture a pharaoh, the towering image in our mind is often Rameses. Some believe he was the pharaoh of the biblical Exodus, though this remains debated. Whether true or not, his presence in history is undeniable. He wanted to be remembered as a god among kings, and in many ways he succeeded. Medicine and science of the ancients. Beyond monuments and myths, the Egyptians were pioneers of science and medicine. Long before Hippocrates, Egyptian physicians were diagnosing illnesses, setting broken bones, and even performing early forms of surgery. Papyrus scrolls like the Edwin Smith Papyrus and the Ebers Papyrus reveal astonishing detail. Instructions for treating wounds, prescriptions using honey, garlic, and moldy bread, which, remarkably, contain natural antibiotics. They believed illness was partly physical and partly spiritual. A fever might be treated with herbs, but also with prayers and protective amulets. Far from primitive, this holistic view mirrored what modern science now recognizes. The mind and body are deeply connected. Dentistry too was advanced. Archaeologists have found mummies with dental fillings made from resin. Surgeons used copper instruments, scalpels, and forceps. And when death came, embalmers demonstrated an understanding of anatomy that stunned modern scientists. And yet, for all their knowledge, they never separated science from magic. To them, healing was not only a physical craft, but a sacred one. Medicine was a gift from the gods. Magic, amulets, and the invisible world. For the ancient Egyptians, the world was alive with unseen forces. Every moment of life was infused with Heka. Magic, the invisible power that bound the universe. Magic wasn't a fringe belief. It was the foundation of existence. Priests used spells to protect temples. Farmers used charms to bless crops. Mothers placed amulets around their children's necks to guard against illness. The Eye of Horus, perhaps Egypt's most famous symbol, was believed to ward off evil and restore health. Scarab beetles represented rebirth, while ankhs promised eternal life. Even the written word was magical. To inscribe a name was to give it power. To erase a name was to condemn it to non-existence. This is why pharaohs like Akhenaten tried to erase their predecessors from history. By destroying their names, they hoped to destroy their souls. Spells from the Book of the Dead weren't abstract. They were practical instructions for navigating the afterlife. Without them, a soul could be lost forever. In modern times, we may call it superstition, but in Egypt, magic was reality, woven into medicine, politics, religion, and daily life. It was not unreal. It was the most real thing of all. Secrets beneath the sand. For all we know of Egypt, there is even more we do not. Beneath the shifting sands lie secrets still undiscovered. The Valley of the Kings, where pharaohs of the New Kingdom were buried, has yielded over 60 tombs. Yet archaeologists believe more remain hidden. High-tech scans suggest chambers may still lie undiscovered behind the walls of Tutankhamun's tomb. Could one of them belong to Nefertiti herself? The Sphinx too remains an enigma. Carved from a single block of limestone, it guards the plateau of Giza with a silent, eternal gaze. Who built it? Was it Khafra, as tradition claims? Or could it be older, perhaps predating even the pyramids? Some geologists argue that weathering on the Sphinx suggests water erosion, meaning it could be thousands of years older than conventional history admits. Then, there are the lost cities. In recent decades, archaeologists have uncovered whole towns buried beneath desert sands. The kitchens, workshops, and streets of ordinary Egyptians frozen in time. Each discovery reminds us that Egypt still keeps many of its stories locked away. And the greatest mystery of all? How did a civilization so ancient, without modern technology, achieve feats that baffle us even today? Were they simply masters of ingenuity, or did they possess knowledge we have since forgotten? The journey back in time. Ancient Egypt, Cleopatra, the last pharaoh. For nearly 3,000 years, Egypt had stood as one of the greatest civilizations on Earth. But by the 1st century BCE, the sands of power were shifting. The mighty Nile Kingdom faced pressure from foreign powers, Persians, Greeks, and finally, Rome. And at the center of this turbulent age stood one woman, Cleopatra VII. Cleopatra was not just a queen, she was the last pharaoh of Egypt. Intelligent, multilingual, and politically astute, she became a master of survival in a world dominated by men. She spoke not only Egyptian, but also Greek, Hebrew, Latin, and several other languages. Unlike many rulers before her, Cleopatra directly connected with her people, presenting herself as the living goddess Isis reborn. But Cleopatra's story is forever entwined with Rome. First, with Julius Caesar, who visited Egypt during a time of civil war between Cleopatra and her brother. With Caesar's backing, she secured the throne, and together they had a son, Caesarion. After Caesar's assassination, Cleopatra aligned herself with Mark Antony, one of Rome's most powerful generals. Their love affair has echoed through history, a blend of passion, politics, and tragedy. Together, they tried to build an Eastern empire strong enough to rival Rome itself. But Rome, under Octavian, later Augustus, could not tolerate this threat. The conflict culminated in the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, where Antony and Cleopatra's forces were defeated. Facing inevitable capture, Antony took his own life, and Cleopatra soon followed, famously said to have ended her days by allowing a venomous asp to bite her. With her death in 30 BCE, Egypt became a province of Rome. The age of pharaohs ended, swallowed by empire. Yet Cleopatra's name has never died. She became legend, portrayed as seductress, strategist, goddess, and tragic heroine. To this day, she embodies both the glory and the fall of ancient Egypt. Rediscovery, when the sands spoke again. In the 19th century, explorers and scholars descended on Egypt with a hunger to uncover its mysteries. What had been buried for millennia now emerged from the sand. The Rosetta Stone, discovered in 1799, became the key to unlocking hieroglyphs. Suddenly, the voices of the ancients were heard again. Pharaohs' names, long forgotten, returned to history. In 1922, Howard Carter's discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb electrified the world. Unlike so many others, this tomb was nearly intact, filled with golden treasures beyond imagination. The Boy King, who ruled for less than a decade, became immortal, not through his reign, but through the dazzling artifacts left behind. Since then, excavations have revealed entire cities, temples, and secrets. In 2021, archaeologists uncovered a lost golden city near Luxor, frozen in time for over 3,000 years. Every year, new discoveries remind us that Egypt is far from finished telling its story. The world may have buried Egypt, but the sands never forgot. What truly made Egypt endure? It was not only pyramids, temples, or gold. It was an idea, a philosophy that life, death, and time itself were part of a great cycle. The Egyptians saw the universe not as linear, but eternal. The sun god Ra died each night, only to rise again. The Nile flooded and receded over and over. Pharaohs died, but through mummification and ritual, they were reborn in the afterlife. This obsession with eternity created a culture unlike any other. To them, the boundary between life and death was thin. Every moment on earth was preparation for the next world. Every stone they placed, every symbol they carved was designed not for decades, but for millennia. That is why Egypt feels timeless. They lived for eternity, and in doing so, they became eternal. Even though the temples fell and the gods were silenced, the spirit of Egypt never died. Its symbols live on. The Eye of Horus, the Ankh, the Scarab. Its architecture influenced the Greeks, the Romans, and through them, the entire Western world. The obelisks that stand in Paris, London, Rome, and New York are silent reminders of Egypt's reach. In religion, echoes of Egypt remain. The weighing of the heart resembles the concept of divine judgment. The resurrection of Osiris parallels stories told later in Christianity. Even the image of wings, halos, and eternal light may trace their roots back to Egypt. In art and literature, Egypt is reborn again and again, an eternal muse of mystery and wonder. From Shakespeare's Antony and Cleopatra to modern films, from Freemasonry to pop culture, Egypt's fingerprints are everywhere. And perhaps most powerfully, Egypt reminds us of our mortality. It whispers, build something greater than yourself, and you may outlive time. The Journey, Back in Time, Ancient Egypt. The Book of the Dead, Guide to Eternity. Buried with the dead, painted on tomb walls or written on papyrus scrolls, the Book of the Dead was not a book in the modern sense. It was a collection of spells, prayers, and instructions. To the Egyptians, it was the ultimate travel guide, a map for the soul's dangerous journey through the afterlife. Death was not the end. It was the beginning of a perilous voyage. The soul had to navigate rivers of fire, face monstrous guardians, cross gates protected by gods with terrifying faces, and overcome the eternal serpent Apophis. Without guidance, the soul could be lost forever. The Book of the Dead gave the answers: secret names to pass gates, spells to defeat demons, and prayers to call on divine protection. It was like carrying a passport signed by the gods. One of the most famous passages describes the weighing of the heart. The soul stands before Osiris, god of the dead, while the heart is placed on scales against the feather of Maat, truth and justice. If the heart was heavy with sin, it was devoured by Ammit, the crocodile lion hippopotamus monster. But if the heart was pure, the soul entered the field of reeds, a paradise mirroring the best of Egypt, where crops grew endlessly, families reunited, and life was eternal. In this vision, we see something profound. The Egyptians created one of the earliest moral systems tied to the afterlife. Your fate was not determined by birth or wealth. It depended on how you lived. The echoes of this idea still shape the world's religions today. The journey of the soul. Imagine the moment after death as an Egyptian. You awaken in darkness. Your Ba, the bird-shaped soul, rises from your body. You see your mummified form wrapped in linen below, and now you must journey into the underworld, the Duat. The Duat was not hell in the Christian sense. It was a vast realm of trials and transformations. Each hour of night, the sun god Ra himself traveled through it, fighting the serpent Apophis, bringing light back to the world. To pass, your soul joined him on this cosmic voyage. The gates of the Duat were terrifying, guarded by fire-breathing serpents, gods with knives, and beings with names like He Who Lives on Snakes or Devourer of Shadows. To survive, you needed the correct spell, the correct knowledge. The journey was not about brute strength, it was about wisdom. Once you reached the Hall of Maat, everything was decided. The scales determined not just your afterlife, but your very existence. A heart devoured by Ammit meant your soul was annihilated, true death. But a heart balanced meant eternity. The Egyptians did not fear death as an end. They feared being forgotten. To them, memory was immortality. That is why their tombs were filled with names, images, and offerings. As long as someone spoke your name, your Ka, the life force, still lived. Perhaps this is why we still speak the names of Tutankhamun, Rameses, and Cleopatra. They are still alive, in a way the Egyptians would have understood perfectly. At the center of all Egyptian thought was Maat, the principle of truth, balance, justice, and cosmic order. Maat was more than a goddess. She was the very fabric of the universe. Without her, there was only chaos. Pharaohs swore to uphold Maat, judges carried her feather as a symbol, and even the gods themselves obeyed her law. Living by Maat meant living in harmony, respecting family, honoring the gods, speaking truth, and keeping balance in all things. To lie, cheat, or act unjustly was to break Maat, and that weight would follow you into the afterlife. In essence, it was an ethical code, a reminder that eternity depended not on wealth or power, but on living truthfully. It's humbling to think that thousands of years before modern philosophy, the Egyptians had already built a moral compass that shaped human destiny. Eternal symbols and hidden wisdom. Why do Egyptian symbols still captivate us? The answer lies in their depth. Each symbol was not just art, it was philosophy encoded in image. The Ankh, shaped like a cross with a loop, represented life and eternal existence. It was carried by gods and pharaohs alike, often shown being offered directly to the lips of a king, literally giving him the breath of life. The scarab beetle, rolling its ball of dung across the sand, was a symbol of the sun's daily rebirth. The beetle became an amulet of protection and transformation, buried with mummies to help the soul rise again. The Jed pillar, symbolizing stability, represented Osiris's spine, strength, endurance, and resurrection. Even the pyramids themselves were symbols, massive stairways pointing toward the stars, eternal mountains that connected earth to heaven. These weren't just religious ideas, they were ways of encoding truths about existence, death, and renewal. The Egyptians may not have left us books of philosophy like the Greeks, but their philosophy is carved into stone, whispered in myths, and wrapped in linen around their dead. The eternal fascination. Why does ancient Egypt still haunt our imagination? Why do we keep returning to the Nile, the pyramids, the silent gaze of the Sphinx? Perhaps because Egypt mastered something we still struggle with. The art of permanence. In a world where empires rise and fall, Egypt seems timeless. The pyramids still stand, the Nile still flows, the names of its gods still echo. Perhaps, too, Egypt touches something universal in us, the longing to outlast death, to live beyond time. Their rituals, their tombs, their art, all were built around a single human truth. We fear being forgotten. And yet, the Egyptians found an answer. They believed that by inscribing your name, by building something eternal, by living in Maat, you could live forever. And in a way, they were right. Thousands of years later, we still speak their names, study their wisdom, and stand in awe of their works. The journey back in time. Ancient Egypt. The pyramids and the Sphinx. Questions without end. For all we've explored, one truth remains. Ancient Egypt is still an unsolved riddle. The pyramids of Giza stand as if they were built yesterday. Their stones align so perfectly with the stars that even our most advanced technology struggles to explain it. The Great Pyramid is oriented to true north with an error of only a fraction of a degree. How could a civilization, armed with copper tools and manpower alone, achieve such precision? Some argue it was simple engineering genius, ramps, pulleys, and sheer determination. Others whisper about lost knowledge, perhaps even wisdom inherited from an older forgotten civilization, wiped away by time and flood. The truth may never be known. And then there is the Sphinx. Carved from a single mass of limestone, its gaze has watched the desert for thousands of years. Tradition credits Pharaoh Khafre, builder of the second pyramid, but erosion patterns hint at water damage, suggesting the Sphinx may be far older, from a time when Egypt's desert was lush and wet. If that is true, then the history of Egypt is even deeper than we imagine, stretching back into the mists of prehistory to a forgotten dawn. The pyramids and Sphinx are not just monuments, they are questions carved in stone, and those questions may outlast us all. The hidden Egypt, what we still don't know. Despite centuries of exploration, Egypt continues to guard its secrets. Modern scans reveal hidden chambers in the Great Pyramid. Archaeologists suspect more tombs in the Valley of the Kings, and the sands conceal entire cities, waiting patiently to be uncovered. Every year, new discoveries emerge: a lost workshop, a priest's hidden tomb, a forgotten papyrus scroll. Each one adds a piece to the puzzle, but with every answer comes more questions. Could there be entire libraries buried beneath temples? Could the fabled Hall of Records, a mythical archive of all ancient knowledge, still lie undiscovered beneath the Sphinx or within the desert caves? Egypt has always been a civilization of duality: life and death, chaos and order, known and unknown. Perhaps it was meant to remain partly hidden, so that each generation would rediscover it anew, never letting its story die. Lessons from the Nile. Amid all its mysteries, Egypt offers timeless lessons. It teaches us that human beings are capable of greatness beyond imagination. With no machines, no computers, no electricity, they built works that have outlasted every empire since. It teaches us about balance. The principle of Maat, truth, justice, order, is as relevant today as it was 5,000 years ago. In a world of chaos, balance remains the path to survival. It teaches us that death is not an end. The Egyptians believed we are judged not by power or wealth, but by the weight of our hearts. Their vision of morality shaped civilizations after them, and still shapes how we think of good and evil. And above all, it teaches us about time. The Egyptians lived not for the moment, but for eternity. They carved their names in stone, painted their lives on walls, and trusted the Nile to carry their memory forward. And here we are, thousands of years later, still speaking their names. Every civilization since has borrowed from Egypt. And in a strange way, that means Egypt never truly died. Its body may lie buried in sand, but its spirit flows through us all. Egypt is more than history. It is a mirror. When we look at its monuments, its gods, its myths, we see not only an ancient people, we see ourselves. We too build monuments, seeking to outlast time. We too tell stories of gods, heavens, and afterlives, searching for meaning. We too fear being forgotten and long for immortality. Perhaps that is why Egypt never loses its grip on us. It is not just about what they built or what they believed. It is about what they reveal, that humanity has always been reaching for eternity, trying to carve its name in the universe before the sands of time erase it. And so, the sands of Egypt whisper to us still. The Nile flows, the pyramids rise, the Sphinx gazes, and the names of kings and queens echo through eternity. They remind us that time is both our enemy and our legacy, that we are fragile, yet capable of leaving marks that defy the centuries, that death may come for all, but memory can make us immortal. In the end, perhaps the Egyptians discovered the greatest truth of all, that eternity is not found in gold or stone, but in the stories we leave behind. And as long as humanity remembers, ancient Egypt will never die. The sands of Egypt may hold their secrets, but the story continues with us. Which mystery of ancient Egypt fascinates you the most? The pyramids, the Book of the Dead, or the enigma of the Sphinx? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know what story of humanity's past you want us to cover next, because every perspective adds another piece to this timeless puzzle. And if you enjoyed this journey back in time, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and join us for more explorations into the ancient world. After all, history is not just the past. It is the key to understanding who we are today. Check out the next video coming up. There we dive even deeper into the ancient past. Welcome to the journey back in time.